In 2023, the backbone of global commerce began to fracture. The Panama Canal, a marvel of 20th century engineering that handles nearly 6% of all global trade, literally began to dry up. As drought conditions forced authorities to slash daily crossings, a queue of megaships stretched for miles into the Caribbean, costing the global economy billions in delays. But while the world panicked over water levels, the Mexican government made a move that went almost unnoticed by the general public, yet sent a shockwave through the Pentagon and Beijing. They didn't just announce a new infrastructure project. They deployed the military to physically seize a private railway. With $5 billion burned and soldiers guarding the tracks, Mexico is attempting to resurrect a trade route that has been dead for 100 years. They are betting that the future of global shipping isn't water, but steel. But this isn't just about moving containers. It is a geopolitical gamble that involves China, the United States, and the very sovereignty of North America. What is really happening across the Isthmus of Tehuantepec? And can a dry canal actually compete with the legend of Panama? You are about to find out. To understand the magnitude of Mexico's gamble, we first have to understand the structural failure of current global logistics. The maritime infrastructure we rely on suffers from a fatal temporal mismatch. The Panama Canal was engineered in the early 1900s, an era before containerization, before just-in-time logistics, and decades before the advent of the ultra-large container vessel. Today, we are trying to push 200,000-ton leviathans through waterways designed for steamships. This has created maritime choke points, narrow, fragile links where the physics of capacity collides with the reality of demand. When the Panama Canal Authority restricted draft limits due to the 2023 drought, it wasn't a temporary glitch, it was a warning. The system lacks redundancy. Shipping conglomerates were left with a binary choice: wait weeks in a queue, bleeding money on crew and charter costs, or reroute thousands of miles around Cape Horn, burning fuel and erasing profit margins. The global supply chain is desperate for a pressure valve, and historically, whenever the world's trade routes constrict, a new power emerges to cut the knot. Most people assume we are stuck with the geography we have, but in 1907, 7 years before the first ship crossed Panama, Mexico had already solved this problem. The concept isn't new, it's a resurrection. At the turn of the 20th century, Mexican President Porfirio Diaz envisioned the narrow Isthmus of Tehuantepec as the center of the world. His engineers blasted a railway corridor through 300 kilometers of jungle, effectively linking the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. By 1907, it worked. Cargo was offloaded at Coatzacoalcos in the Gulf, railed across the spine of the continent, and reloaded at Salina Cruz on the Pacific. For a brief, shimmering moment, Mexico controlled the fastest route between oceans. But in 1914, the Panama Canal opened its locks. The efficiency of a water-only route, which required no unloading, no reloading, and no labor-intensive transfers, rendered the Mexican railway obsolete overnight. Traffic collapsed, the iron rusted, the jungle reclaimed the tracks. For a century, the lesson was clear: you cannot compete with a canal. However, the variables of that equation have changed. In 1914, ships were small and time was cheap. In 2024, ships are massive, the canal is congested, and in the era of Amazon Prime, speed is the only metric that matters. The Mexican government believes the math has flipped back in their favor, and this time they aren't asking for permission to build.
Entered the Corredor Interoceanico. Officially relaunched in 2018 by President Andrés Manuel López Obrador, this is not merely a refurbishment, it is a total logistical overhaul of the region. The project involves the complete reconstruction of 3 railway lines, totaling over 1,000 kilometers, flanked by new industrial highways. But the rails are just the connective tissue. The heart of the project lies in the terminals. Mexico is dredging massive deep-water ports on both coasts, specifically engineered to accommodate post-Panamax vessels, the giants that physically cannot fit through the Panama Canal's original locks. The operational theory is intermodal velocity. A ship from Shanghai docks at Salina Cruz. Giant gantry cranes strip the containers directly onto a waiting train. The train sprints across the isthmus in under 6 hours. At the Gulf port, the containers are restacked onto a vessel bound for the U.S. East Coast or Europe. On paper, the government claims this can shave days, perhaps even a week, off the total transit time compared to a congested Panama Canal. But infrastructure projects in Latin America are notorious for bureaucratic death spirals. To ensure this didn't happen, the Mexican administration took a step that blurred the line between governance and authoritarianism. By 2020, the project was facing the usual headwinds: legal disputes, rights-of-way issues, and corporate negotiation stalls. Specifically, a critical section of the rail network was controlled by a private conglomerate, Grupo Mexico. Negotiations dragged on. Then, the government snapped. Invoking national security powers, President López Obrador ordered the military to seize control of the disputed railway sections. It was a stunning display of state power, effectively nationalizing private infrastructure at gunpoint to ensure the project's timeline. Critics called it an expropriation that would terrify foreign investors. The government called it recovering strategic assets. Regardless of the politics, the message to the global shipping industry was undeniable. Mexico is all in. This is no longer a commercial venture. It is a mission of national sovereignty. The state has signaled that it will remove any obstacle, legal, physical, or financial, to force this corridor open. Why? Because the potential revenue isn't just in transit fees, it's in the factory floor. Skeptics argue that double handling, lifting a box off a ship, putting it on a train, and lifting it back onto a ship, is inherently inefficient. And historically, they are right. Friction costs money. But let's look at the data. A typical Panama transit takes 8 to 10 hours physically, but that excludes queue time. During peak congestion or drought restrictions, ships can wait 15 days just to enter the locks. The Mexican corridor offers a transit time across the isthmus of roughly 6 to 8 hours. Even with 24 hours allocated for unloading and reloading on either side, the total crossing time is under 3 days. For time-sensitive electronics, automotive parts, or perishables, that speed advantage is worth the premium. Furthermore, the corridor offers something Panama cannot: redundancy. A canal depends on rainfall. A railway depends only on maintenance. In a climate-changed world, steel is more reliable than water. Early trials in 2024 showed transit time reductions of 30 to 40% for specific cargo classes. Mexico isn't trying to steal the coal ships or grain bulkers. They're hunting the high-value cargo. And this shift has attracted the attention of the world's aggressive economic superpower.
This is where the story shifts from logistics to spycraft. For a century, the Panama Canal was effectively an American asset, ensuring U.S. dominance over the Western Hemisphere's trade. Mexico's corridor threatens to decentralize that power. China has noticed. Chinese shipping conglomerates are already the heaviest users of the Panama Canal, and Beijing sees the Mexican corridor as a strategic diversification, a back door into the North American market that bypasses U.S.-controlled choke points. Data from 2024 shows a staggering 60% surge in container volumes from China to Mexico. This suggests that Chinese firms are not just looking to ship through Mexico, but to manufacture in Mexico, a process known as nearshoring.
By setting up assembly plants along the rail corridor, Chinese companies can finish goods within the free trade zone and ship them north into the U.S. by rail, bypassing Pacific Ocean tariffs and logistical bottlenecks. This creates a complex dilemma for Washington. A prosperous Mexico stabilizes the southern border and strengthens the North American supply chain. But a Mexico heavily indebted to Chinese infrastructure investment presents a security nightmare. The U.S. is watching a rival superpower potentially gain leverage over a critical artery of North American commerce right on its doorstep. We are witnessing the end of the single route era. For 100 years, global trade relied on the assumption that there was only one way to cross the Americas. That monopoly is dead. By 2030, the interoceanic corridor is projected to handle millions of tons of cargo annually. It won't replace the Panama Canal, the volume difference is too vast, but it doesn't have to. It only needs to be a viable alternative. Mexico has proven that with enough concrete, political will, and perhaps a little military intervention, geography can be rewritten. The result will be a global shipping network that is more resilient, more competitive, and far more complex. The choke points are loosening. The map is changing. And for the first time in a century, the world is looking at the jungles of southern Mexico and seeing not a barrier, but a bridge. Does the rise of the Mexican corridor signal a new era of Latin American economic power? Or will it become a pawn in the U.S.-China Cold War? Let us know your analysis in the comments. And if you want to understand the engineering behind the Panama Canal's water crisis, click the video on the left. Thanks for watching.